Welcome to episode 6 of The Haunted Hotel. I'm Nayara, and Raoul once again shapes the music, artwork, and editing that deepen the shadows. In this chapter, fear takes form, past actions resurface, and the line between the living and the unseen begins to blur. Stay with us, the hotel is closing in. Chapter 12. Do you think she is mad? Agnes asked. I think she is simply wicked, false, superstitious, inveterately cruel, but not mad. I believe her main motive in coming here was to enjoy the luxury of frightening you. She has frightened me. I am ashamed to own it, but so it is. Henry looked at her, hesitated for a moment, and seated himself on the sofa by her side. I am very anxious about you, Agnes, he said, but for the fortunate chance which led me to call here today, who knows what that vile woman might not have said or done if she had found you alone. My dear, you are leading a sadly unprotected, solitary life. I don't like to think of it. I want to see it changed, especially after what has happened today. No, it is useless to tell me that you have your old nurse. She is too old. She is not in your rank of life. There is no sufficient protection in the companionship of such a person for a lady in your position. Don't mistake me, Agnes. When I say in the sincerity of my devotion to you. He paused and took her hand. She made a feeble effort to withdraw it and yielded. Will the day never come, he pleaded, when the privilege of protecting you may be mine? When you will be the pride and joy of my life as long as my life lasts? He pressed her hand gently. She made no reply. The color came and went on her face. Her eyes were turned away from him. Have I been so unhappy as to offend you? He asked. She answered that. She said, almost in a whisper, "Oh, have I distressed you? You have made me think of the sad days that are gone." She said no more. She only tried to withdraw her hand from his for the second time. He still held it. He lifted it to his lips. Can I never make you think of other days than those, of the happier days to come? Or if you must think of the time that has passed, can you not look back to the time when I first loved you? She sighed as he put the question. Spare me, Henry, she answered sadly. Say no more. The color again rose in her cheeks. Her hand trembled in his. She looked lovely, with her eyes cast down and her bosom heaving gently. At that moment he would have given everything he had in the world to take her in his arms and kiss her. Some mysterious sympathy passing from his hand to hers seemed to tell her what was in his mind. She snatched her hand away and suddenly looked up at him. The tears were in her eyes. She said nothing. She let her eyes speak for her. They warned him, without anger, without unkindness, but still they warned him to press her no further that day. Only tell me that I am forgiven, he said as he rose from the sofa. Yes, she answered quietly. You are forgiven. I have not lowered myself in your estimation, Agnes. Oh no. Do you wish me to leave? She rose in her turn from the sofa and walked to her writing table before she replied. The unfinished letter which she had been writing when Lady Montgomery interrupted her lay open on the blotting book. As she looked at the letter, and then looked at Henry, a smile that charmed everybody showed itself in her face. You must not go just yet, she said. I have something to tell you. I really know how to express it. The shortest way perhaps will be to let you find it out for yourself. You have been speaking of my lonely, unprotected life here. It is not a very happy life, Henry. I own that. She paused, observing the growing anxiety of his expression as he looked at her, with a shy satisfaction that perplexed him. Do you know that I have anticipated your idea? She went on. I am going to make a great change in my life, if your brother Stephen and his wife will only consent to it." She opened the desk of the writing table while she spoke, took a letter out and handed it to Henry. He received it from her mechanically. Vague doubts which he hardly understood himself kept him silent. It was impossible that the change in her life of which she had spoken could mean that she was about to be married, and yet he was conscious of a perfectly unreasonable reluctance to open the letter. Their eyes met. She smiled again. "Look at the address," she said. "You ought to know the handwriting, but I dare say you won't." He looked at the address. It was in the large, irregular, uncertain writing of a child. He opened the letter instantly. "Dear Aunt Agnes, our governess is going away. She has had money left to her and a house of her own. We have had cake and wine to drink her health. You promised to be our governess if we wanted another. We want you. Mama knows nothing about this. Please come, for Mama can get another governess. Your loving Lucy," who writes this. "Clara and Blanche have tried to write too, but they are too young to do it. They blot the paper." "Your eldest niece," Agnes explained as Henry looked at her in amazement. "The children used to call me aunt when I was staying with their mother in Ireland in the autumn. The three girls were my inseparable companions. They are the most charming children I know. It's quite true that I offered to be their governess if they ever wanted one on the day when I left them to return to London. I was writing to propose it to their mother just before you came." "Not seriously?" Henry exclaimed. Agnes placed her unfinished letter in his hand. Enough of it had been written to show that she did seriously propose to enter the household of Mr. and Mrs. Stephen Westwick as governess to their children. Henry's bewilderment was not to be expressed in words. "They won't believe you are in earnest," he said. "Why not?" Agnes asked quietly. "You are my brother Stephen's cousin. You are his wife's old friend." "All the more reason, Henry, for trust to move the charge of their children." "But you are their equal. You are not obliged to get your living by teaching. There is something absurd in your entering their service as a governess." "What is there absurd in it? The children love me, their mother loves me, the father has shown me innumerable instances of his true friendship and regard. I am the very woman for the place, and as to my education, I must have completely forgotten it. Indeed, if I am not fit to teach 3 children, the eldest of whom is only 11 years old. You say I am their equal. Are there no other women who serve as governesses and who are the equals of the persons whom they serve? Besides, I don't know that I am their equal. Have I not heard that your brother Stephen was the next heir to the title? Will he not be the new lord? Never mind answering me. We won't dispute whether I am right or wrong in turning governess. We will wait the event. I am weary of my lonely, useless existence here, and eager to make my life more happy and more useful in the household of all others in which I should like most to have a place. If you will look again, you will see that I have these personal considerations still to urge before I finish my letter. You don't know your brother and his wife as well as I do, if you doubt their answer. I believe they have courage enough and heart enough to say yes." Henry submitted without being convinced. He was a man who disliked all eccentric departures from custom and routine, and he felt especially suspicious of the change proposed in the life of Agnes. With new interests to occupy her mind, she might be less favorably disposed to listen to him on the next occasion when he urged his suit. The influence of the lonely, useless existence of which she complained was distinctly an influence in his favor. While her heart was empty, her heart was accessible, but with his nieces in full possession of it, the clouds of doubt overshadowed his prospects. He knew the sex well enough to keep these purely selfish perplexities to himself. The wedding policy was especially the policy to pursue with a woman as sensitive as Agnes. If he once offended her delicacy, he was lost. For the moment, he wisely controlled himself and changed the subject. "My little niece's letter has had an effect," he said, "which the child never contemplated in writing it. She has just reminded me of one of the objects that I had in calling on you today. Agnes looked at the child's letter. How does Lucy do that? She asked. Lucy's governess is not the only lucky person who has had money left her, Henry answered. Is our old nurse in the house? You don't mean to say that nurse has got a legacy? She has got £100. Send for her, Agnes, while I show you the letter. He took a handful of letters from his pocket and looked through them while Agnes rang the bell. Returning to him, she noticed a printed letter among the rest, which lay open on the table. It was a prospectus, and the title of it was Palace Hotel Company of Venice, Limited. The two words, Palace and Venice, instantly recalled her mind to the unwelcome visit of Lady Montgomery. What is that? She asked, pointing to the title. Henry suspended his search and glanced at the prospectus. A really promising speculation, he said. Large hotels always pay well if they're well managed. I know the man who is appointed to be manager of this hotel when it is open to the public, and I have such entire confidence in him that I have become one of the shareholders of the company. The reply did not appear to satisfy Agnes. Why is the hotel called the Palace Hotel? She inquired. Henry looked at her and at once penetrated her motive for asking the question. Yes, he said, it is the palace that Montgomery hired at Venice, and it has been purchased by the company to be changed into an hotel. Agnes turned away in silence and took a chair at the farther end of the room. Henry had disappointed her. His income as a younger son stood in need, as she well knew, of all the additions that he could make to it by successful speculation. But she was unreasonable enough, nevertheless, to disapprove of his attempting to make money already out of the house in which his brother had died. Incapable of understanding this purely sentimental view of a plain matter of business, Henry returned to his papers in some perplexity at the sudden change in the manner of Agnes towards him. Just as he found the letter of which he was in search, the nurse made her appearance. He glanced at Agnes, expecting that she would speak first. She never even looked up when the nurse came in. It was left to Henry to tell the old woman why the bell had summoned her to the drawing room. Well, nurse, he said, you have had a windfall of luck. You have had a legacy left to you of £100. The nurse showed no outward signs of exultation. She waited a little to get the announcement of the legacy well settled in her mind, and then she said quietly, Master Henry, who gives me that money, if you please? My late brother, Lord Montgomery, gives it to you. Agnes instantly looked up, interested in the matter for the first time. Henry went on. His will leaves legacies to the surviving old servants of the family. There is a letter from his lawyers authorizing you to apply to them for the money. In every class of society, gratitude is the rarest of all human virtues. In the nurse's class, it is extremely rare. Her opinion of the man who had deceived and deserted her mistress remained the same opinion still, perfectly undisturbed by the passing circumstance of the legacy. I wonder if I reminded my lord of the old servants, she said. He would never have heart enough to remember them himself. Agnes subtly interposed. Nature, always abhorring monotony, institutes reserves of temperous elements in the composition of the gentlest woman living. Even Agnes could on rare occasions be angry. The nurse's view of Montgomery's character seemed to have provoked her beyond endurance. If you have any sense of shame in you, she broke out, you ought to be ashamed of what you have just said. Your ingratitude disgusts me. I leave you to speak with her, Henry. He won't mind it. With this significant intimation that he too had dropped out of his customary place in her good opinion, she left the room. The nurse received the slight reproof administered to her with every appearance of feeling rather amused by it than not. When the door had closed, this female philosopher winked at Henry. There's a power of obstinacy in young women, she remarked. This Agnes wouldn't give my lord up as a bad one even when he jilted her. and now she's sweet on him after he's dead. Say a word against him and she fires up as you see. Whole obstinacy. It will wear out with time. Stick to her, Master Henry, stick to her. She doesn't seem to have offended you, said Henry. She? The nurse repeated in amazement. She offend me? I like her in her tantrums. It reminds me of her when she was a baby. Lord bless you, when I go to bid her good night, she'll give me a big kiss, poor dear, and say, Nurse, I didn't mean it. About this money, Master Henry, if I was younger I should spend it in dress and jewellery. But I'm too old for that. What shall I do with my legacy when I have got it? Put it out at interest, Henry suggested. Get so much a year for it, you know. How much shall I get? The nurse asked. If you put your £100 into the funds, you will get between £3 and £4 a year. The nurse shook her head. £3 or £4 a year? That won't do. I want more than that. Look here, Master Henry, I don't care about this bit of money, and never did like the man who was left to me, though he was your brother. If I lost it all tomorrow, I shouldn't break my heart. I'm well enough off as it is for the rest of my days. They say you're a speculator. Put me in for a good thing, there's a day. Neck or nothing, and that for the funds. She slapped her fingers to express her content for security of investment at 3%. Henry produced the prospectus of the Venetian Hotel Company. You're a funny old woman, he said. There, you dashing speculator, there is neck or nothing for you. You must keep it a secret from Miss Agnes, mind, and not at all sure that she would approve my helping you to this investment. The nurse took out her spectacles. 6% guaranteed, she read, and the directors have every reason to believe that 10% or more will be ultimately realized to the shareholders by the hotel. Put me into that, Master Henry, and wherever you go, for heaven's sake, recommend the hotel to your friends. So the nurse, following Henry's mercenary example, had her pecuniary interest too in the house in which Lord Montgomery had died. 3 days passed before Henry was able to visit Agnes again. In that time the little cloud between them had entirely passed away. Agnes received him with even more than her customary kindness. She was in better spirits than usual. Her letter to Mrs. Stephen Westwick had been answered by return of post, and her proposal had been joyfully accepted, with one modification. She was to visit the Westwicks for a month, and, if she really liked teaching the children, she was then to be governess, aunt and cousin all in one, and was only to go away in an event which her friends in Ireland persisted in contemplating, the event of her marriage. You see, I was right, she said to Henry. He was still incredulous. Are you really going? He asked. I am going next week. When shall I see you again? You know you are always welcome at your brother's house. You can see me when you like. She held out her hand. Pardon me for leaving you, I am beginning to pack up already. Henry tried to kiss her at parting. She drew back directly. Why not? I am your cousin, he said. I don't like it, she answered. Henry looked at her and submitted. Her refusal to grant him his privilege as a cousin was a good sign. It was indirectly an act of encouragement to him in the character of her lover. On the first day in the week, Agnes left London on her way to Ireland. As the event proved, this was not destined to be the end of her journey. The way to Ireland was only the first stage on a roundabout road, the road that led to the palace at Venice. If you like this audio story, please consider to subscribe the channel and let us know what you like the most in this presentation. Chapter 13. In the spring of the year 1861, Agnes was established at the country seat of her two friends, now promoted on the death of the first lord, without offspring, to be the new Lord and Lady Montgomery. The old nurse was not separated from her mistress. A place suited to her time of life had been found for her in the pleasant Irish household. She was perfectly happy in her new sphere, and she spent her first half-year's dividend from the Venice Hotel Company with characteristic prodigality in presents for the children. Early in the year also the directors of the life insurance offices submitted to circumstances and paid the £10,000. Immediately afterwards the widow of the first Lady Montgomery, otherwise the Dowager Lady Montgomery, left England with Baron Rivar for the United States. The Baron's object was announced in the scientific columns of the newspapers to be investigation into the present state of experimental chemistry in the great American Republic. His sister informed inquiring friends that she accompanied him in the hope of finding consolation and change of scene after the bereavement that had fallen on her. Hearing this news from Henry Westwick, then paying a visit at his brother's house, Agnes was conscious of a certain sense of relief. "With the Atlantic between us," she said, "surely I have done with that terrible woman now." Barely a week passed before those words had been spoken, before an event happened which reminded Agnes of the terrible woman once more. On that day, Henry's engagements had obliged him to return to London. He had ventured, on the morning of his departure, to press his suit once more on Agnes, and the children, as he had anticipated, proved to be innocent obstacles in the way of his success. On the other hand, he had privately secured a firm ally in his sister-in-law. "Have a little patience," the new Lady Montgomerys had said, "and leave me to turn the influence of the children in the right direction. If they can persuade her to listen to you, they shall." The two ladies had accompanied Henry and some other guests who went away at the same time to the railway station, and had just driven back to the house, when the servant announced that a person of the name of Roland was waiting to see her ladyship. "Is it a woman?" "Yes, my lady." The young Lady Montgomery turned to Agnes. "This is the very person," she said, "whom the lawyer thought likely to help him when he was trying to trace the lost courier." "You don't mean the English maid who was with Lady Montgomery at Venice?" "Mind you, don't speak of Montgomery's horrid widow by the name which is my name now. Stephanie and I have arranged to call her by her foreign title before she was married. I am Lady Montgomery and she is the Countess. In that way there will be no confusion. Yes, Mrs. Roland was in my service before she became the Countess's maid. She was a perfectly trustworthy person, with one defect that obliged me to send her away, a sullen temper which led to perpetual complaints of her in the servants' hall. Would you like to see her?" Agnes accepted the proposal in the faint hope of getting some information for the courier's wife. The complete defeat of every attempt to trace the lost man had been accepted as final by Mrs. Ferrari. She had deliberately arrayed herself in widow's mourning, and was earning her livelihood in an employment which the unwearied kindness of Agnes had procured for her in London. The last chance of penetrating the mystery of Ferrari's disappearance seemed to rest now on what Ferrari's former fellow servant might be able to tell. With highly wrought expectations, Agnes followed her friend into the room in which Mrs. Roland was waiting. A tall, bony woman, in the autumn of life, with sunken eyes and iron-grey hair, rose stiffly from her chair and saluted the ladies with stern submission as they opened the door. A person of unblemished character evidently, but not without visible drawbacks. Deep bushy eyebrows, an awfully deep and solemn voice, a harsh unbending manner, a complete absence in her figure of the underlying lines characteristic of the sex, presented virtue in this excellent person under its least alluring aspect. Strangers, on a first introduction to her, were accustomed to wonder why she was not a man. "Are you pretty well, Mrs. Roland?" "I am as well as I can expect to be, my lady, at my time of life." "Is there anything I can do for you?" "Your ladyship can do me a great favour if you will please speak to my character while I was in her service. I am offered a place to wait on an invalid lady who has lately come to live in this neighbourhood." "Ah, yes, I have heard of her, a Mrs. Carberry, with a very pretty niece, I am told. But, Mrs. Roland, you left my service some time ago. Mrs. Carberry will surely expect you to refer to the last mistress by whom you were employed." A flash of virtuous indignation irradiated Mrs. Roland's sunken eyes. She coughed before she answered, as if her last mistress stuck in her throat. "I have explained to Mrs. Carberry, my lady, that the person I last served, I really cannot give her title in your ladyship's presence, has left England for America. Mrs. Carberry knows that I acquitted the person of my own free will, and knows why, and approves of my conduct so far. A word from your ladyship will be amply sufficient to get me the situation." "Very well, Mrs. Roland, I have no objection to be a reference, under the circumstances. Mrs. Carberry will find me at home tomorrow until 2 o'clock. "Mrs. Carberry is not well enough to leave the house, my lady. Her niece, Miss Haldane, will call and make the inquiries if your ladyship has no objections." "I have not the least objection. The pretty niece carries her own welcome with her. Wait a minute, Mrs. Roland. This lady is Miss Lockwood, my husband's cousin and my friend. She is anxious to speak to you about the courier who was in the late Lord Montgomery's service at Venice." Mrs. Roland's bushy eyebrows frowned in stern disapproval of the new topic of conversation. "I regret to hear it, my lady," was all she said. "Perhaps you have not been informed of what happened after you left Venice," Agnes ventured to add. "Ferrari left the palace secretly, and he has never been heard of since." Mrs. Roland mysteriously closed her eyes as if to exclude some vision of the lost courier which was of a nature to disturb a respectable woman. "Nothing that Mr. Ferrari could do would surprise me," she replied in her deepest bass tones. "You speak rather harshly of him," said Agnes. Mrs. Roland suddenly opened her eyes again. "I speak harshly of nobody without reason," she said. "Mr. Ferrari behaved to me, Miss Lockwood, as no old man living has ever behaved before or since." "What did he do?" Mrs. Roland answered with a stony stare of horror. "He took liberties with me." Young Lady Montgomery suddenly turned aside and put her handkerchief over her mouth in convulsions of suppressed laughter. Mrs. Roland went on with a grim enjoyment of bewilderment which her reply had produced in Agnes. "And when I insisted on an apology, Monsieur had the audacity to say that the life of the palace was dull and he didn't know how else to amuse himself." "I am afraid I have hardly made myself understood," said Agnes. "I am not speaking to you out of any interest in Ferrari. Are you aware that he is married?" "I pity his wife," said Mrs. Roland. "She is naturally in great grief about him," Agnes proceeded. "She ought to thank God she is rid of him," Mrs. Roland interposed. Agnes still persisted. "I have known Mrs. Ferrari from her childhood, and I am sincerely anxious to help her in this matter. Did you notice anything while you were at Venice that would account for her husband's extraordinary disappearance? And what sort of terms, for instance, did he live with his master and mistress?" "On terms of familiarity with his mistress," said Mrs. Roland, which was simply sickening to a respectable English servant. "She used to encourage him to talk to her about all his affairs, how he got on with his wife, and how pressed he was for money and such like, just as if they were equals. Contemptible, that's what I call it." "And his master," Agnes continued, "how did Ferrari get on with Lord Montgomery?" "My lord used to live shut up with his studies and his sorrows," Mrs. Roland answered, with a high solemnity expressive of respect for his lordship's memory. "Mr. Ferrari got his money when it was due, and he cared for nothing else. If I could afford it, I would leave the place too, but I can't afford it. Those were the last words he said to me on the morning when I left the palace." I made no reply. After what had happened on that other occasion, I was naturally not on speaking terms with Mr. Ferrari. "Can you really tell me nothing which will throw any light on this matter?" "Nothing," said Mrs. Roland with an undisguised relish of the disappointment that she was inflicting. "There was another member of the family at Venice," Agnes resumed, determined to sift the questions to the bottom while she had the chance. "There was Baron Rivar." Mrs. Roland lifted her large hands covered with rusty black gloves in mute protest against the introduction of Baron Rivar as a subject of inquiry. "Are you aware, miss," she began, "that I left my place in consequence of what I observed?" Agnes stopped her there. "I only wanted to ask," she explained, "if anything was said or done by Baron Rivar which might account for Ferrari's strange conduct." "Nothing that I know of," said Mrs. Roland. "The Baron and Mr. Ferrari, if I may use such an expression, were birds of a feather, so far as I could see. I mean, one was as unprincipled as the other. I am a just woman, and I will give you an example. Only the day before I left, I heard the Baron say, through the open door of his room, while I was passing along the corridor, 'Ferrari, I want £1,000. What would you do for £1,000? And I heard Mr. Ferrari answer, 'Anything, sir, as long as I was not found out.' And then they both burst out laughing. I heard no more than that. Judge for yourself, miss." Agnes reflected for a moment. £1,000 was a sum that had been sent to Mrs. Ferrari in the anonymous letter. Was that enclosure in any way connected as a result with a conversation between the Baron and Ferrari? It was useless to press any more inquiries on Mrs. Roland. She could give no further information which was of the slightest importance to the object in view. There was no alternative but to grant her dismissal. One more effort had been made to find a trace of the lost man, and once again the effort had failed. They were a family party at the dinner table that day. The only guest left in the house was a nephew of the new Lord Montgomery, the eldest son of his sister, Lady Parville. Lady Montgomery could not resist telling story of the first and last attack made on the virtue of Mrs. Roland, with a comically exact imitation of Mrs. Roland's deep and dismal voice. Being asked by her husband what was the object which had brought that formidable person to the house, she naturally mentioned the expected visit of Mrs. Haldane. Arthur Parville, unusually silent and preoccupied so far, suddenly struck into the conversation with a burst of enthusiasm. "Miss Haldane is the most charming girl in all Ireland," he said. "I caught sight of her yesterday over the wall of her garden as I was riding by. What time is she coming tomorrow? Before 2, I'll look into the drawing-room by accident. I am dying to be introduced to her." Agnes was amused by his enthusiasm. "Are you in love with Miss Haldane already?" she asked. Arthur answered gravely, "It's no joking matter. I have been all day at the garden wall waiting to see her again. It depends on Miss Haldane to make me the happiest or the wretchedest man living." "You foolish boy, how can you talk such nonsense?" He was talking nonsense, undoubtedly. But if Agnes had only known it, he was doing something more than that. He was innocently leading her another stage nearer on the way to Venice.
You've been listening to episode 6 of The Haunted Hotel, narrated by Nayara, with Raoul crafting every sound, image and cut. If the mystery has drawn you deeper, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. Episode 7 awaits, and the truth is no longer willing to hide.